good friend of mine, George Tucker, one of the top attorneys in the state of Louisiana. The reason why I love George is because no one can tell a story like him.
I hear you all.
And the transformation when I gave my life to the Lord Jesus Christ changed my life. And very rarely have I ever had someone who actually saw it and who has a photographic memory. And he probably will be the lead person as it relates to when we write the book and do the movie. Because what I'm getting ready to tell you, if you put it on the screen before George, before we start the interview, I want to go over 3 things I want to put in your heart. But the first thing is a statement I want you to remember and never forget in your life if you put it up. The only difference between people is what they believe. Did y'all hear what I just said? I'm going to say it again. And don't allow yourself to just sit back and think you understand this or even that you believe this. A lot of this stuff is in our head, but it's not in our hearts. Well, when we do this interview, you will see that this is real. You will see somebody that has evidence of the power of when God saves a person, and then that person begins to get God's plan for their lives and believe it long before it ever happens. What we're doing tonight will change communities. What we're doing tonight will change homes. Marriages will change. Single men will stop being frustrated. We will be able to control our bodies and walk in holiness. Somebody say holiness. All we're doing now, we can change the game. You see, I voted. I voted already. And you pray about voting, and you do your homework. And then you pray as God leads you, and your homework provides. Don't you ever just go vote because of a political party. We're the church, and we're a kingdom. We're inside of a kingdom. Somebody say a kingdom. So I got 3 things in this. The first one is, God can do nothing outside your will. John chapter 20. Put the first slide up there. John chapter 20. Let's do it. Come on, somebody say, let's do it. Come on, it's time to go. This is the first example. Somebody say will. You get to decide what you're going to believe. God has already finished your life long before you ever got in your mother's womb. There are 3 things I'm going to talk to my good friend George about. Number 1 is what he saw on Southern University's campus. When I started to have this crazy belief, when I gave my life to Christ and he sees the transformation. So the first thing would be about what he saw. The second thing would be about him growing up as a young man with a single mother and some of the things that he shared with me. And what he said was a lot of times we talk a lot about the single mothers, but we don't talk about the child that was raised by the single mother and the psychology and the challenges that go with all the disbelief, all the unbelief, all the things that come with the dysfunction of not having that male figure in the home. And then the third thing is we're talking about HBCUs, historical black colleges and universities. And that is what's happening through Deion Sanders. And when Deion Sanders went to Jackson State, in his press conference, he put on the screen, believe. And you know that's been his whole mantra, that he had a vision, and that vision started, and I'll show you in a second. You first start with God's purpose for your life. And then once you find out God's purpose for your life, all of those that are live stream, all of those that are listening, I need you to be engaged and pay attention to this. Over in John chapter 20, and this is Thomas. Some of us know him as Doubting Thomas. Thomas is one of the disciples who didn't initially see Jesus when he was resurrected and walking on the earth. Somebody told Thomas about him. And Thomas said, unless I get to touch his hands and see where the print of the nails were, unless I get to touch his side and see him, unless I physically see him, he says, I will not believe. Say it again. I will not believe. You didn't say that like you mean it. George, you need to be saying it too. I will not believe. What did I learn from that? You get to choose what you're going to believe. It's crazy. The Wright brothers, who actually were the first to fly, their father was a minister. He was preaching in a pulpit that man will never fly when the boys are out tinkering. The only difference between people is what? Come on. The only difference between people is what? That's why you can have people in the same room hear the same thing, and one will believe it and another won't. You get 10 spies sent out into the promised land. 8 come back totally not believing because they got spooked off by what they saw. And I'm speaking in your life, you will no longer live your life anymore just based on what you see. And here's what Thomas said. Thomas said, I will not believe unless I see him. And Jesus always meets us where we are. Come on. Come on. Come on. He always does what? Can hear you. So he meets John here. He meets Thomas in the book of John. Verse 27. Then said he to Thomas, Jesus, reach hither my finger, and behold my hands. Reach hither your hand and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. Did y'all hear what I just said? Yes. He believed because he felt it, because he saw it. Thomas didn't know that God was getting ready to institute. Jesus was leaving, and now he was going to be speaking to human hearts. And you would have to believe him even though it made no sense to you. You would have to believe that he could remove an addiction out of your life long before you experience it. You need to believe that you are healed by Jesus' stripes long before the pain stops. Because George is going to share with you later on, and it's a beautiful thing when he talks about an appraisal. When somebody gives you an appraisal, come to your house, all of it is subjective. When it talks about real estate, they make suggestive decisions as it relates to the value of your house based on comps. But humans don't have comps. Come on. Humans don't have comps. You can't appraise a human. Because if you try to appraise a human based on what they see and what they're looking like now, you will always undervalue a human. Come on, somebody in here. Come on. So the first thing you got to deal and understand, it's your will. And when God tell you something ridiculous like, you my man, but you smoking blunts, and God speaks to you in the middle of a puff, you know you my man. You see, God has already finished what you're dealing with. He's already saved your marriage. I had a guy I met in McDonald's today. He's been separated 3 years. And we got to talking. I say, man, your marriage healed. He said, what do you mean? I say, hey, man, by the time God send you across my path, I need to tell you your marriage already healed. Because the spirit realm is ahead of the natural realm. And when God speaks, it may not show up until years later. When you go see a movie, that movie has already been made a year or two ago. You are sitting in a movie that's already been made. Your life has already been made. Now you sitting like a bump on a log in here. And the reason why you sitting like a bump on a log in here, because you don't understand the power of what I'm telling you. This changes countries. This changes this divide that we have in our countries. This changed marriages. This changed yourself if you will believe what God said about you. He says, Thomas, look what he says, verse 28. And Thomas answered and said unto him, my Lord and my God. Listen to what Jesus said, and he's talking to you too. Somebody say, me too. Me too. Jesus said unto him, Thomas, because you've seen me physically, you believe. Oh, he's getting ready to drop the mic on us. And look what he says. He's including you in this. Blessed are they that have not seen me and yet have believed. That's where we are now. That's where we are now. You believe what the Word of God says, regardless of the situation. You believe what he says. If you go out and you got a bunch of ragtag kids who on your football team and it don't look like they got nothing in them, all you do if you Deion Sanders know, number one, God sent you to Jackson State. And when you get there, you tell a guy like Aeneas, before everything ever happens, you say, Aeneas, I'm going after Division I players. Aeneas, I'm getting ready to change the game with all HBCUs. Because anytime God does something in your life, it's never just for you. It's for the whole thing. Did y'all hear what I just said? It's for the whole thing. Some of y'all need to get angry because you haven't been believing enough where stuff is already changing in your life. You got to already believe that your children are already saved, already walking with God. Even if they're acting funny, we are supposed to be the ridiculous, crazy people that believe what God says. Come on in here. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. What God says, if he says it, just believe it, Abraham. Just believe it, Thomas. He said, blessed are those that don't see me, but believe. He was talking about us. You are created to believe. You ain't got to be saved to be a believer. Salvation is belief in Christ. But humans were created to live by what they believe. That's supposed to be a natural trait to humans. That's why you can't assess somebody who believes something that you can't currently see. That's what this interview is going to be about. It's not about Pastor Aeneas and blowing me up. Whatever has happened has already happened. You need witnesses to your life. You need credible people that'll sit on a witness stand and say what they saw. Y'all got what I'm hearing? Y'all hear what I'm saying? I can already tell you how he'll heal a marriage. Yeah, because he healed mine. Yeah, I can already tell you that. I can already tell you he's a healer of your body. He healed mine. I can already tell you if you're struggling with something in your life and you're having a difficult time getting rid of it, if you'll cry out to him and ask him, I already know he's going to deliver you. How I know? My cousin didn't tell me that. I experienced that. Come on. Did y'all hear what I just said? So the first thing is your will. That's you in charge of that. You get to decide. God tell you something. God tell you, man, you my man. You get to decide whether you're going to believe it. Y'all got it? Everybody got that? You get to decide. I can't hear you. Here's the other thing. Your willingness to believe will determine if you ever experience everything God has for you. Pastor Aeneas, how you know? God, in Luke chapter 1, there's a priest by the name of Zechariah. Zechariah and his wife were old, and his wife, Elizabeth, was barren. And when you get old in the natural, it ain't party time in the bed. Y'all understand? They were already past. The men had all paused. Y'all, menopause. Y'all got that? All right, all my ladies that's listening in on this, y'all watch yourself, all right? In other words, she was already through. There was no more baby time. But John, and it's the awesome thing about God, he meets you right where you are. All John the priest was doing, Paul, was doing his duty in the temple. He was lighting the incense and the people were praying. John and his wife Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth were already praying for a child. And some of us give up on our prayers because it hasn't happened yet. They didn't know what we now know. He didn't give them a baby earlier when they prayed because it wasn't the right timing. You got to understand, God is perfect in timing. He got something he's getting ready to do. Their child, who they would call John, had to be in concert when Jesus appeared on the scene. Are y'all hearing what I'm telling y'all? That some of the things that God tell you, it's going to get done. It just happens when? In time. So the angel shows up while he's just doing his everyday job. So he says, Zechariah, your prayers have been heard. Gabriel, this is the angel that stands in God's presence. You want to talk to somebody who's standing in God's presence. He told Zechariah, he said, Zechariah, your prayers have been heard. By this time next year, your wife's going to have a child, and you're to name him John. I'm getting ready to mess with some of y'all right here. I'm getting ready to mess with you in a second. I'm getting ready to find and tell you your answers of why you're not seeing your destiny. Watch, watch, watch. Somebody say watch. In the chat, put in there, watch. He said, how can this be? Zechariah said, it's going to happen because God said it. And he said, because you didn't believe me, I'm going to silence you. I'm not going to let you talk until after the boy born. You know what that taught me? Your words can cause what you believe to never happen. And when there are things that God has to get done, he's not going to let you jack it up. Did y'all hear what I just said? Why? This boy got to come here. It's going to happen with Zechariah and Elizabeth. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if it hasn't happened yet. I'm telling you right now, by this time next year, what Zechariah was supposed to say, because he should have known better. He's supposed to be a man of power. You'd be surprised how many people stand up here and have no belief in faith. And struggling up and down, talk a good game, but don't believe what God says at all. Because they're walking by sight and not by faith. They're not walking by what God says. That's why when you know what God says, it causes you to have some stability. It causes you not to be wavering. Well, God, when is it going to happen? If you believe it, it doesn't matter when it happens. Because to you, it's like it's already happened. And so you talk in line with what God says. So Zechariah says you should have known better. And this got to get done. There are certain things God got to do. You're not going to talk. I'm silencing you. You won't say a word till after the baby born. So that must mean we have the capacity with our words to forfeit what God is telling us. You better get this, boy. You come and sit in church every day. I'm giving you some stuff off the chain up in here. If you don't get this, you're around here trying to get your bills paid and all that kind of stuff. Man, you're supposed to be living so far above that. All you got to do is believe what God said. He's your heavenly Father. He says a cattle on 1,000 hills is his. He says the silver and the gold is mine. So if he's your daddy, why are you not stunting like your daddy? Why you think they call you believers? So now we know your words. Your words. Y'all understand? Your words. Right there on the screen. Y'all see it? Your words. And you know the third thing I found out? If you don't believe, you can have a wake. Put that up there. Y'all know what a wake is, huh? When people come view you. In other words, if you refuse to believe, you can die. Physically, or the vision can die if you refuse to believe. 2 Kings, I think it's chapter 8. The king of Israel is in a pickle. He's in a bad situation. He has a guy that's his assistant that's with him. The Syrians have surrounded Israel and wouldn't let them out. Wouldn't let food in and wouldn't let anything out. So it was a desperate time. People were starving. Mothers were eating their children. It was bad. It was desperate. So the king of Israel came to the prophet Elisha. And Elisha told him, and the king was mad at Elisha because the king had a chance to kill the Syrian troops. And Elisha said, no, feed them and send them home. And that king was upset because the Syrians had now repaid them by coming surround them. And so that king was upset. He came to Elisha. He said, man, I ought to kill you. I had a chance to wipe these people out, and you told me to feed them and send them back, and look how they repaid us. Now we're getting ready to die. And Elisha said, homie, by this time tomorrow, you're going to be able to get food for free. You talking about food stamps? You getting ready by this time tomorrow. I'm getting ready to change the game, is what he said. And the king's assistant, he was with him. He heard the prophet say it. He said to the prophet, man, if God opened the windows of heaven, I don't believe that. That'll never happen. And the prophet told him, bet, you gonna see it, but you won't partake of it. So what ended up happening? Those Syrians were resting in their little area. God caused a sound to come and scared the hell out of them. And all of them just start running, leaving the fire on, if they were in today's time, leaving the cars running. They were gone. They didn't know what happened. They just left. Next thing you know, some lepers came and went into the area and saw everything. He said he'll give you houses that you didn't build. The prophet told him by this time tomorrow. He made those people leave and run, but they left everything. Did y'all hear what I said? They left what? Everything. So these people starving, and the king finds out it's true, and that all these spoils are there, the food is there, but the king can't believe it. He thinks it's an ambush. But he goes anyway. And he goes looking around, don't see anybody, see the food on the table, look like everybody to run. And he said, all right, go let the people of God know in Israel. Go tell them. But y'all do know when you got a bunch of hungry people, you better organize them. So the king told that guy, you remember that doubting guy? The king told him. He said, hey, you go stand by the gate and you ration it out. You only let a few people in at a time. How many of y'all know when you hungry and you eating your babies, you're not going to go in a line? So y'all know what happened? A doggone stampede. They ran over that joker and killed him because he didn't believe. It's your choice. What we getting ready to say and what George getting ready to say right now, this is an actual story. Let's go, George. Can you hear me?
I can.
Let's go, baby. Let's go, man. This is my teammate. This is my brother. And nobody tells a story like him. So, George, let's roll with it. Come on, let's start out with you seeing me get saved. Wherever you want to start, I'm going to let you go. Let's go, George.
You're talking about, like, the football part, right?
Yes. Whatever you let us say, let's go.
Just to give you a little backdrop, see, when we played ball, one of the worst things, the biggest things about football was two-a-days, which is where you practice twice a day. We all dreaded it. And in '88, we had already completed two-a-days, and there were a lot of guys on the team from New Orleans. So somebody convinced him to come out for football. And somehow they talked the coach and let him come out there after we completed two-a-days. We had started school. And he just came out there. So nothing special, just another cat coming out here trying to play football. And he said he wanted to be a cornerback, but, during that time, Southern University was known for its cornerbacks because we had Coach Chasm, who was a cornerback guru. He could take anybody and make a great cornerback if they could survive him. So we were pretty hefty at cornerback, and we hear him say he wants to be a cornerback. It's like, well, that's not going to happen because one of his old high school teammates was Maurice Hurst, who went on to be an NFL great, and the other one was his high school teammate Kirk Davenport, who was a quarterback who had signed big school and ended up coming to play ball with us. So, and the year before that, we had Michael Ball. Everybody that I played ball with in college and played cornerback went on to play in the NFL, except one who decided he was going to quit playing football after we all left. So everybody else that played corner during my career played in the NFL. So that was my measuring stick. So I see Aeneas come out there, and he's like, he's going to play cornerback. It's like, there's no room. So they put him at safety. And, it was nothing special about him, except he would fight anybody over anything, anytime. Matter of fact, all the time. So that was what he was known for. Matter of fact, we gave him the nickname Dirty Red. But what stood out most about him was, now, a lot of people don't understand this or don't know this. They just know what they know. But he was a junior in college, hadn't played football, hadn't trained, hadn't done anything since high school. He was a junior in college and walked on And it was at the very back of the line. Everybody before him because we'd already been there for 2 days. So if he's gonna get any reps, everybody goes. Well, none of us were impressed. And as a matter of fact, some of us were appalled at how hard he would practice with us saying for no reason. I mean, you're not gonna play. Well, as soon as he realized that he was gonna make the traveling team, he went over to the bookstore. And back during our era, which is 35 years ago, there was we used to airbrush everything. You know, you get whatever you want airbrushed on your shirts. There it is. He went to the bookstore and got that shirt right there and had the nerve to come over to the Mini Dome wearing that shirt. Now, I want y'all to understand the significance of that. Mini Lot, at that time, the #1 cornerback in all of football was a guy that played for the Cleveland Browns who was being coached by, ironically, Nick Saban, who was the cornerback coach at the Cleveland Browns at the time, a guy named Frank Minifield, and the other cornerback was Hanford Dixon. That was the top cornerback tandem in the NFL. But the best cornerback, well, we thought was the best, was Frank Minifield. And of course, everybody knows who Ronnie Lott is. And at that time, Ronnie Lott was by far the greatest safety in the NFL. He goes to the Mini Dome with no position. I mean, he goes to the bookstore with no position. I mean, as deep on the depth chart as you can be, and gets a T-shirt with Mini Lot airbrushed on it. We were so offended by what we thought was arrogance because somehow we thought he was trying to piggyback off Maurice Hurst, who was already, everybody knew he was going to the NFL. And since he was his homeboy, he just wants to get a little shine, and nobody's going to really harass him because a lot of the boys on the team, his whole teammate, are homeboys. You didn't want to bother the boys too often. Once they put a shit, you're not going to go into New Orleans bothering those kids. So you just got to look at it and say what you got to say in your own little group. So he comes to the Mini Dome, and we had a bunch of guys on the team, real comedian. And I just couldn't believe, and nobody could believe that for whatever reason, this guy who, when he came out there, he couldn't touch his toes. I mean, we have a defensive coordinator named Coach Dewey who was wanting to try to, get him in the mix, but he had to get him in shape and he had to get him sort of flexible to find any position for him to play. So once he got past that, we started playing ball and they put him on special teams as a walk-on. And, every kick, I mean, you can go check the film from '88, every kick, either he made the solo tackle or he was a part of the assist, every kick. So a couple weeks in, that earns him some time on the football field, but it wasn't at cornerback. It was at safety and wheel linebacker. As a matter of fact, he almost got put off the defense because one time he was supposed to go and rush the pass, but since he wants the defensive back, he gonna read the play and take off and go and get. You remember that? Coach Stewart, we playing Mr. Ford A&M. Yeah. And he decided he's gonna bail off the quarterback, go be a defensive back. Coach, what are you doing? You trying to let him know that he saw the play was going, and almost got him fired. But he played safety and wheel linebacker throughout that season, which was '88, his first season out there. And lo and behold, he didn't play any cornerback until we got to the Bayou Classic. And in '88, our teammate's mother was passing while we were playing. Kirk Davenport, his high school teammate, his mother in the charity hospital passing. God bless her soul. And they took Kirk to go see his mom and say his last regards during the game. So they put Aeneas at cornerback during the game. First time playing. I don't think he'd even practiced it. Not during real practice. He might have practiced on his own after practice at cornerback. And it became apparent that day that there was about to be a change of the guard because not only did he do well, it looked like he was at home. And the rest was sort of, it was just on from there. After the season, there was a guy on our team named Brian Thomas, who was the fastest guy I've ever seen in my life, who would teach Aeneas during practice how to breathe and run. By running off from him 10, 15 yards. Just gone and tell him, relax, run. So as soon as the season's over, he decided he's going to train with BT, who was our SWAC champion, 100 meters and all that stuff. Well, I'd seen enough to know that I want some of it. So I just followed them out there to the track. And I participated in track just because he did it. Because by that time, I could tell that there was something clearly different about him. That if you didn't pay attention, you didn't see it. We call everything crazy, So we just decided he was crazy. But I was one of those guys, I befriended everybody, So I would hang around, try to see what I could figure out, because I wanted to be able to create some kind of little skit about it. I was the team clown, period, town jester. And so, but what I ended up finding out was that there was method with his madness.
Can you hear me, Tucker? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want you to share specifically, because there's some things that you say to me at times, even how you live your life today, you understanding that after seeing whatever you saw and you can explain it, explain to the men what you meant by an appraiser.
Yeah. I know, and I shared with him yesterday when we were talking that, it was this morning actually, that most of us, 99% of us are only as committed as we can convince or impress appraisers. What I mean by that is whoever it is that's making the judgment, whoever it is that you regard their evaluation, the way they assess whatever. And I said, who I am today and how I approach what most people call challenges as opportunities is based on me having a literal day-to-day viewing of how he came from being this walk-on that couldn't touch his toes, to who you all see as a gold jacket Hall of Fame in the NFL, from Southern University, where it had to be where appraisers really had no impression on him, that literally, like he says, he believed. And believe is not just thinking. All of us thought, all of us wanted, but we didn't believe. And he is the person that made me appreciate that appraisers are just that. People can only tell you what they see based on how they compare it to what they've seen. And I have never seen since him anything that comes close to him as it relates to actually manifesting what you want so badly because you believe it. And every time I decide that I have maxed out, I have reached the depth of whatever it is that I have in me, I realize that if I hadn't accomplished what I set out to accomplish, then there's more to do, and there's actually more for me to give. Because I've seen him on empty, and I don't mean like most people think I'm talking about. I would watch him when he was nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean as far as our appraisals. He was just a walk-on who was just trying to really earn normal practice year, because at our school, you don't get regular practice year when you walk on. They give you crash dummy stuff, so if you're gonna quit, this ought to make you quit. So I'm watching him when he's walking around with this Nakona helmet and these shoes that are dry rotting, playing as if he was going to the NFL. And I watched him not just practice, I watched him prepare for practice and get in film and watch film when he's not going to play his position. And then after practice and after film, go back and train. And we would go out at night because, we were supposedly, popular. So we go out and we're coming in 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And we pass by this walk-on's door and you can hear this rope hitting the floor. Tuck, 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 tuck. You open the door and there's steam coming out of the room. He's been in there doing it so long that there's steam coming out of the room. And he is as red as a beet for nothing in my mind, because we playing. We scholarship players and we got all-state this and MVP that and recruited by this. And all he had in his room that he brought over there, they finally moved him into a room, was a one-time Cox Player of the Week that he hung up. You know those certificates you give me, you graduate from kindergarten, you just take them and put a little frame around it? And he had that hang on the wall, and we would get drunk. We'd knock on his roommate's door and call him, man, look at this. I mean, what is this dude trying to be? What is he thinking? Guess what, though? While we're talking and we're praising, he's working. And I don't mean like the kind of work you measure. All I know is that at some point it became clear to us that none of us wanted whatever it is he's trying to get nearly as bad as we thought we wanted it. He is a person that made me realize I didn't love football. That's why I started focusing on becoming an attorney. I always wanted to play ball, I thought. But that's what made me realize that this is not for everybody. And today, I tell him all the time, man, I say, bro, it's just God that made me be able to watch this unfold, because it's unlike anything. I can still never imagine it now. And he's why I train kids. Me watching him do what he did with what he had makes me clear that these kids can do a lot more with what they have. They just don't believe it yet. And I work with these kids until what they think becomes what they believe, and I move on to the next kid. Because what he said is very powerful. It's all about belief. And it's not something that he's preaching because he's reading it. I have never in my life seen anybody make the kind of transformation that he made from where I met when I was 18 and he was 19. I mean, every part of it. His wife, I mean, I knew her when we were kids. I'm talking about before I even knew him, from Sunday school conventions. I mean, I'm talking about we were middle school. We didn't know each other's names, but we'd see each other everywhere. We got to college, we knew each other. We went honors classes and stuff together. So it's like me watching how God protected him from him until he could put him somewhere where he realized that he was more powerful than he knew was powerful for me. I mean, I have no, and I tell him all the time, man, the person who had the most prevalent impression on my life is him. My relationship with him and what he didn't know he was allowing me, because I guess God made us friends, but it was meant for me to be able to know that you don't have to be all of the things that the world makes you think you have to be in order to become that. And I mean, I share with him about how I've never seen anybody with two parents have that kind of fire in them. And he didn't understand what I meant. I say, look, man, look, as a child being born without a daddy, you're always trying to find favor in the people that you're around. And you never think any more of yourself than the last man or the closest man to you. And he didn't even have to do that. So a lot of these people that you see, I mean, most of the great football players came from broken homes. See, sometimes it's a daddy there, but he's got some serious addiction, abuse, or whatever. So it's still lacking the love of a daddy. And we watched him when in college with a daddy who embraced everything, loved him to death, disciplined him, everything. And I didn't understand how somebody could have that kind of fire all the time about everything without there being dysfunction. So what usually requires dysfunction was just truly belief. And I tell him, man, you have no idea how deeply what you have allowed me to witness. I'm not just talking about with him, I'm talking about with him and his wife. Before she was his wife. There's all kinds of things I was able to witness while they were developing their relationship, and how much of a compass she was for everything that happened after they met. And how it took God saving him for me to be able to appreciate that, me watching it, because once again, the person I knew in '88 wasn't the person that came into fall '90 that was able to allow his relationship with God, and relationship with Tracy, and Pastor Tracy, to become what you all see today. There's just so many instances of things that I witnessed, things we did together. I mean, just that were monumental. And I will never be able to have an excuse for what I didn't do, unless it's just that I didn't believe it. And when he says about believe, that is the most, and I guess that's where Prime gets it, because these are people who've had to overcome all it. Maybe Prime didn't have to overcome the same stuff, but he had to consistently reinforce in people that he believed it. So I mean, I don't know.
George, you mentioned something in reference to growing up as a single, with a single mother, and you mentioned how that mindset challenges you even in current relationships.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned about you gave me some cues as it relates to knowing in the neighborhood a predator and a provider. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, I mean, it's like, when you have a dad at home, dads don't teach boys to be predatory on women. Not in-home dads, not your mother's husband, because you will still have to view him as somebody who has to respect your mother. But when you're a single boy, when you're a boy from a single parent home, and you're always trying to find men to look up to, they often give you the most bravado version of what a man is. And they want you to understand that if you do this, then you're entitled to that. And what I was telling Aeneas was that, when you're a boy, and I don't even want to use the word I use, but a boy from an illegitimate existence, no matter how your mother makes you feel, you see, your mother teaches you love and adoration, but a man teaches you worth. And I had to sit as a child and try to figure out all of the things that made me feel so angry, worthless, loved, but still unwanted. I mean, it's a really confusing childhood, because all of the people that do spend time with you and want to, get to know you and adore you and give you some adulation, 90% of it's women. And I don't mean because they're interested. I'm just saying that women like to take boys and make sure they become safe adults. But it takes a man to take a boy and make him become a productive provider and a protector. Because see, what happens is, and that's what I was telling him, it sort of molds how you deal with your relationships, that you'll protect, you'll pay for, and you will find yourself in that you didn't have a model. And I know it sounds like an excuse, but it's a reality that without that model, you can always have father figures, but it requires a father fixture. And that's what I grew up without a father fixture. But I had men who were fixed in my life that I put there that I didn't want to turn loose. So, as a little kid, there was a man, and neither one of them were high school graduates. Neither one. These are just when I started trying to figure out what I thought a man was, I attached what I thought was a man. And I learned a lot about how I became a man, or I expressed myself as a man. I realized a lot of it was based on me acting out what I had an appreciation for, and it was a lot of it to be a bully. I mean, it's just a lot, man. And when you get to be around people who have a fire and it's not because of dysfunction, you start to want to channel yourself differently. You want to be better. You should be better, because you watched him go from somebody who was so set on fighting everybody all the time to somebody who is who you see now. And if he could do it from how far he was, because like I said, we've known each other a very long time, and we went through a lot of things together, and I have never seen or even heard of this kind of metamorphosis. And when I look at his kids and I look at the, I said, unless you're his wife, you still don't have an appreciation for what belief, conviction, commitment, and love will do for you, you know? And I have him sort of as a moral compass because, I mean, a lot of things that I go through, I mean, and he knows this, I'm about as bullheaded as anybody that I've met. I mean, he may have met more bullheaded people, but I'm the most bullheaded person I know. And there's the only person that ever gets me to change midstream in the middle of my ranting is him. To where it actually is no longer how I feel. Because I don't know of anybody who has set perfection as a model as well as a goal. Because all of us have perfection as a model, but that's not necessarily our goal. You know, we'll get to a point, and when people start feeling that we have it as our goal, then we'll accept it, knowing that it's not true. And now we'll start living a lie because so many people don't know the truth. And from the day that I've seen him decide he was going to give his life to Christ, I've seen nothing but the struggle and the challenges that he's continually forced himself to take on to I guess to try to be as pure as he could with it. Don't know nobody else like that either. So, you know, when I say that, you know, belief that he's an actual model of whatever it is that you want to know, whatever it is that you want to see, whatever it is it takes for you to understand, I've seen it in its purest form. You know, I watched somebody who played on a team where we had guys that we know and he knows. I mean, and like a guy named Charlie Moore, I mean, who was in our minds set to play that position. We were mad with him for a long time because they played him rather than Charlie Moore. Because Charlie Moore could run a 4.2 40, he could bench 315, 14, 15 times. I mean, he was mean as a bobcat. I mean, and he was out there before this. Why is he playing? So it's just so many things that he had to deal with that he really didn't have to deal with because he didn't take into consideration. We take so many of the sidebars and make them the focus. He never changed his focus, and he never deviated from his many lot. And just to see in 2014 him be inducted into the Hall of Fame after having made the Pro Bowl, a perennial Pro Bowl at cornerback, like Frank Minifield, and then after his injury getting moved to safety, and now being a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro at safety. So it literally ended just like he's forecast when it began, in a trash pile.
Wow.
And, you know, I mean, come on, man.
And Tucker, I want to bring gravity to this. Your words, and as you know, are so crystal clear because it's your experience. But I want to make sure everyone knows that's here. I am by no means the ideal person that's gotten everything right. I just have refused to give up. I've just refused to not forgive myself and utilize one of the greatest assets that God gave me as a defensive back, which is the ability to overcome a bad play. Christians don't fail, they just mishandle mistakes made. And so what I've learned to do is to get forgiveness from God and forgive myself. Tucker, the final thing is, you and I have talked about the SWAC, Southwestern Athletic Conference, historical black colleges and universities. And we're seeing that an unusual and unprecedented amount of focus. And by the way, all schools are outstanding. This just portion I'm near and dear in my heart because I came from an HBCU. And my dad did, and my brother as well. So when we see the light that has shined in this country on Jackson State because of a man that believed, Deion Sanders, regardless of what you think about him, whether you think he's arrogant, it doesn't matter. I can tell you the reason he's there is because he believes God has called him to be there. So the other caveat I need to make sure you understand, beliefs also starts when you believe that God has given you a purpose in life. And when you have a purpose in life, it really doesn't matter with anyone else. You want to bring other people along. You want to lead, but if everybody stops, you keep going because you're going somewhere. What Tucker just said, I asked the guy in McDonald's today who was separated from his wife 3 years. I said, where are you going? And he didn't know. And then he asked me, he said, well, where are you going? I said, I'm going straight toward Christ. And when Christ reveals to me to go do something ridiculous, I didn't know it was God at the time, and go get this spray painted on this shirt, made no sense. I didn't try to get their approval. He didn't even tell you about how much the guys was hating on me. He didn't even tell you they'd look in when I was running track and look ridiculous, and they would go out. Tucker, you could say it without using any other words. You could share with them real quick the Kimbros and all of those guys, because you also have to understand when you get into your purpose, not everybody is going to understand it.
Yeah.
But they're not your haters. They just don't understand that if they believe and find out what they're supposed to be doing, they too are capable of being great. So they're not your haters. Well, they're hating on me. No, they don't even know you. They're just misguided, and nobody's told them, hey, there's a God. His name is Jesus Christ. He's the Son of God. And if you'll submit your life to him, he will now infuse his spirit in you, not to get you to heaven, but to make you aware of you've been created with a purpose. And that this thing was already finished. Tucker, you don't see this over here, and I don't know if they can move the camera. When you guys get a chance to see this, these are all the Pro Bowl watches that I got for going over to Hawaii. This is the NFC Championship ring. All of this was inside of me. And if you were a betting person, just looking at how I started, as George said, you wouldn't have bet on me.
At all.
At all. And do you know, other people can think that, but you can't. Did y'all hear what I just said? Other people, that's all it is, their opinions. That's it. And too many of us let other people's opinions carry way too much weight in our lives. It doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter where you were born. You submit to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He says, I will reward, I'm a rewarder. And to hear my brother's testimony and to know he's given his life to Christ and be able to have conversations where he and I could talk about how we're growing today. We're not perfect, but I'm here to tell you, every one of you should have your own spray paint. Every one of you should have your own story. That's how you get him glory. His glory is you and I finally becoming the real people we're called to be. And when we live that out and share it with other people, they're going to see it. That's called your life giving God glory. George, Southwestern Athletic Conference will never be the same. One of the things I want to make sure I share in this with anybody that's going to hear it, all the influences that are influenced the SWAC commissioner, even SWAC coaches. This unusual opportunity of God sending Deion Sanders, as he sent each and every other coach, Coach Eddie Robinson Jr., Alabama State, Coach Eric Dooley, Southern University. But all of them now, yes, you can have competition, but you also should see that a rising tide lifts all boats. A rising tide lifts all boats. We should all be rallying around, attempting to do whatever we can to keep Deion Sanders in the SWAC family. And not have this envy and jealousy. When it comes down to coaching, coaches are going to have competition. You win the Super Bowl, the next year the worst team is going to play you to try to beat you. That's fine in a competitive arena, but we don't hate on each other. Deion Sanders is SWAC. He is SWAC. He is SWAC. And the truth is, all of us are SWAC. And when these schools are still around for the next generations, they're first generation college kids from the hoods in different places that are going to these schools. And we have to never allow division because of pride and because of envy. This is an amazing time, and the light is being shined on all HBCU students. And for that, we celebrate. And we celebrate every coach. And I like to say it in closing. We're all stars, just some of us shine brighter. We are all stars, just some of us shine brighter. George Tucker, man, I greatly appreciate the work that you do. Many of you all, if you Google up the Jenna 6 case in Louisiana, he, along with Jesse Jackson, he was one of the lead attorneys in that. That's the work that he does. Yeah. So he's taken his gift, and he has a voice. And the things, George, you haven't seen anything yet. You haven't seen anything yet, brother. I saw your finger up. You want to say one more thing?
Well, I just wanted to chime in on the Deion Sanders SWAC little deal, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, because see, a lot of people are familiar with who Deion Sanders is, and when they see Eddie Robinson, without them knowing that that's not the Eddie Robinson's, a lot of people think that's Coach Eddie Robinson's son that used to be at Grambling, you know?
Correct.
And they may not understand that what was being said was not based on a hate on Deion Sanders, but based on a love, and because a lot of people may not know, but he played during the time we played. As a matter of fact, when we were still there, when you were All-American, he was the MVP. And he was a two-time MVP of the SWAC, 90 and 91. And, you know, a lot of people don't know that for years he struggled with deciding to come back because of the state of the the athletic program there, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I know that there are those of us that know the story, we have a different appreciation than those who are fans that are maybe hear you speak about it and may think that you're taking a side.
Gotcha.
You know?
Yes. Because
there's a lot being said about prime time and not really a whole lot of light being shed on the fact that Eddie Robb walked on at Alabama State after being not given a scholarship at Southern. Mm-hmm. And he walked on at Alabama State and went at an academic scholarship and played offensive line. I mean, there's not a huge difference in you all's stories except, you know, he started as straight out of high school and you waited till you were a junior. But I mean, he walked on as a freshman, played offensive line, moved to linebacker, made All-American 2 years. I mean, matter of fact, he's the youngest person ever inducted into the SPAC Hall of Fame. So, you know, there's a difference of viewpoint about what their affiliation with the SWAC is versus what their contribution to the SWAC is. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, and I want to make sure I'm clear as it relates to Coach Eddie Robinson. I know Coach Eddie, and just as George says, he's a man of God.
Yeah.
It's just the frustration and the bantering back and forth and something that happened prior to the game upset him. But I would say to Coach Eddie Robinson or anyone else, that's not for public. That's when coach calls coach privately and have those conversations so it never goes public where now it looks like they're against each other because they're not. Coach Eddie Robb loves Deion and was in the league when Deion was in the league, love him just as much as Deion loves him. But once it goes public, then now the public gets to decide how the narrative is set. And that's where I challenge all of us that for the betterment of all of us, we call each other and we share what the issue is. It's called man to man. And that's what God called us to do. And by the way, that's what Jesus did. He didn't sell any wolf tickets. He came down, took the charge, and got us back to the Father. And he did it privately. The devil didn't even know what he was doing. And that's what we have to do. Y'all got it? What you got, George? I
just want to say one thing. And this last thing I have to say is because it's just to speak on what you just said. is because before we talked, I started doing lives and I took a side. You know, I'm from the SWAC. Of course, I'm Eddie Rock till the wheels come off. And what did you do? You called me and you said, let's talk about it. And after 4 hours of conversation, we finally, this is what resulted from our 4 hour conversation regarding that issue. So much so it took Pastor Tracy had to participate in the call and everything. So this is what happens when you have the conversation in private with somebody who you trust, is having this conversation because you all want to get to a point rather than having a conversation because you're trying to make a point.
Yeah, and just go right to each other. That's what he told us to do. If you have an art with a brother, go to him directly, alone. Don't tell it to anybody else. But go to him alone and address the issue. That's what he called us to do. George, thank you, brother. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can we give Brother George a hand?
You're welcome, man. Anytime, you know that. Anytime, anything.
Love you,
anywhere.
Man. Love you. See you down in Louisiana. Bayou Classic.
Bayou Classic.
Absolutely. Love you.
All right, brother. Love you too, man.
Come on, was that good, brothers? Come on, we can do better than that, man.